Good evening to everyone. Welcome to our Spring 2025 lecture series. I'm Pier Vittorio Aureli. I'm a professor here at the school and I'm director of the institute. And I welcome you also on behalf of our director of the section, Sophie Delay. As you might know, Sophie and I have started since the last semester a new tradition, which is to have a school lecture series where also with recommendations from our esteemed faculty, we invite architects to present to us their work. Since actually last semester, the theme under which we are inviting architects is housing. And the reason why we choose this topic is because Sophie and I realized that in many different forms, housing seems to be a topic that is often addressed into conversations, into PDMs, into many occasions we have at the school, which maybe for you actually it might be, I wouldn't say normal, but somehow something that is obvious. But for people like me who are a bit older, I think it's not so obvious in a way that housing has come back to the agenda of architecture, and by now is producing actually very interesting projects. So this term, we decided actually to still continue to focus on questions of course, affordability, collectivity, as you will see actually in the next lectures, but we had an emphasis this term on reuse. So many projects you will see this term are about reusing existing structures, but there is an exception here, of course, which is basically the first lecture of the lecture series, which we are very, very happy will be delivered by Oliver Lütjens and Thomas Padmanabhan, who are, in my opinion, one of the most interesting architectural office practicing today, and who have produced actually, several buildings. I wouldn't say many, but those buildings actually had an impact, I think, or they are starting to have actually a major impact on the architectural scene because they're very difficult to categorize. In a way, one can say that their work look on one hand to a certain Venturian approach to architectural design, but there is also, there is a certain playfulness, but there is also a certain kind of brutality also in your formal, but also design language. And the two things are two faces of the same coin, but somehow they constantly play a very difficult balancing act. And this is very much the case of the project they are going to present tonight, which is a wonderful housing project. One of the very few projects that, in my opinion, really has been able to reinvent a type. So of course, housing, one of the most difficult things is not just to make a good housing project, but to try to force the typological datum of housing. And this project that you will see in a moment, this housing project, is really doing that. I have to say, maybe this, just mention this to you, it's a very personal comment. It's really a project I would have liked to design myself.
I know.
I'm kind of envious in a way, but also full of admiration and expectations from your lecture. But we are very happy also to welcome back you because you have been teaching here at the EPFL. So we hope there will be a chance also in the near future for you to come back. But meanwhile, we really look forward to your lecture. Thomas, Oliver, thank you so much for being here. And please, a warm applause of welcome to them.
Thank you so much, Vittorio. Do you hear me? No? Yes?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Me too? Yeah, both? Okay, great. We don't hear each other, but
No.
fine.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for the very generous introduction, Vittorio, and thank you for the trigger warning. I was a bit worried because on Instagram it was all reuse, and I thought, oh, there's not a lot of reuse in this building, Thomas. And I hope they're not going to throw tomatoes at us, or Charlotte going to holler from the back. Good. This interest in housing is an interest that we share, not because we've chosen to, but because it was the only thing we were able to do when we started the practice in 2007. As you all know, there's an incredible growth of the major cities in Switzerland. Switzerland itself is growing. It puts a lot of pressure on the housing market. So for young practices in Switzerland, it's the only way how we could enter the market and actually do work is by doing competitions for housing. Actually, the first prize we ever won was in Geneva. Second mention, I think they were horrified, too brutal, but Christian Sumi, who was in the jury, he really liked the project. Luckily, we did not win this project. That was, I don't know, 300 apartments or something? Gigantic. Luckily, we did not win and kind of slowly built up and gained experience. We did some affordable housing in Zurich, and that's how we could enter this pitch here for the building in Regensdorf. Our practice now has grown to about 20 people. We're doing now bigger housing projects with like 180 is the biggest that we're doing, apartments. And this kind of mastering of the big scale is something we're very happy that we had not do that from the beginning and actually could work with much smaller scales and develop an idea of what kind of architecture we want to do. So let's dive into this project.
The Zwhatt longitudinal building H1. The starting point for this project was, can you move to the next slide?
Yeah. You have to explain the name Zwhatt. You remember?
I don't really remember. Can you explain?
Okay, I can explain. Zwhatt is so we are in Regensdorf. Huh? Regensdorf is the fastest growing community in Switzerland. It's in the outskirts of Zurich, about a half an hour train ride from Zurich main station. Regensdorf houses the biggest prison of Switzerland, which you can kind of see there, these buildings. This is where the really hardcore criminals are. Only men, murderers, child molesters. You can see it's mostly village structure. It has a big development from the 60s, shopping mall with towers. A lot of industry that is about to disappear. And it used to be a green space. It used to be a gigantic swamp space, and there's only a few remnants left of that. And this is a sketch by Peter Merkli, who actually did the master plan for the Zwhatt site. Maybe I have to explain the whole story of the Zwhatt site.
Sure.
Yeah. It's owned by the Pensimo. The Pensimo is the biggest pension funds in Switzerland. They do the pensions for Swiss Airlines. They do the pensions for the canton of Zurich, for big industry companies. So they do a lot of investments in housing to get a revenue. And this revenue pays the pension of a lot of people who retire. They bought the site with a master plan that was big block buildings, all the same. And they thought, this is too far out, this is too big, this is all the same, this is not going to work. So they made a charrette. They invited 5 urban planners and made a charrette, a kind of open competition to find the best solution in order to accommodate the diversity in use in different investment vessels, but also to kind of generate a good urban plan. So Peter Merkli won. And this is one of the sketches. This deals with the existing nature. To the right, you see the Katzensee and a remnant of the swampy area. This is called Schlatt. And then you see another one here, this scribble. it's called Harthölzli. And Zwhatt is in between Schlatt and Harthölzli. That's why it's called Zwhatt. Zwischen Schlatt und Harthölzli. So great marketing people. There's a lot of marketing in this project. Smart name. But for Peter, the idea that you could combine two nature spaces within an urban fabric was really important. And you see this line of trees, a big alley that runs through the whole site and connects those two. This is all privately or publicly owned land. Will probably never happen, but Peter is very persistent and he presents the same idea day in, day out. So let's wait for the trees.
So the central element of this area is this formerly industrial commercial area where there's a conglomerate of different existing buildings of different typologies. So instead of proposing a tabula rasa approach where all the buildings are torn down and replaced by a uniform kind of 7-story block structure, Peter Merkley developed a kind of mosaic system, a kind of compositional figure where he would combine different typologies to form a very heterogeneous whole. So as you can see, the alley, the kind of longitudinal axis that Oliver talked about is running from the bottom to the top, and in the center there's a widening space with a series of trees that form a kind of a core space. This central space is flanked by two towers that create a kind of diagonal dynamic, and also framed by a series of parallel buildings to the right and a series of existing U-shaped block buildings to the top. While there was, plus a few small buildings and a few small structures. You can see the little volume at the bottom of one tower. That is the building that we are going to talk to you in a minute, and a series of small pavilions, plus in the center a gigantic Ferris wheel that somehow that Peter imagined as being the kind of visual iconic celebration of this new neighborhood. So we entered the game as the last players. Every field, every building had been decided through competitions or commissions. So we were left with that little volume here. Shall we go to the next image, Ollie, or?
No, the next is about sufficiency.
Okay, so we have this. Do we have a pointer or something? No, never mind. You can see this little volume here. This little volume is somehow hovering at the foot of this tower. It's a beautiful tower designed by Roger Bolzhauser, but it's also, in the best neoliberal sense, it's also a sound protection for the expensive apartments in the tower, because the train is nearby and also a major road is nearby. So the investor, they subdivided the different buildings into different categories that were assigned to different investment vessels. Each investment vessel was catering to a specific client segment, so high segment, middle segment, low segment, and cheap experimental segment. So the Tourismus is the cheap experimental segment, Adimora, that you can probably imagine was given to the sound protection wall that we had the honor to enter the competition for.
And this competition was pitched as a sufficiency pitch. They invited, or you had to pre-qualify, huh? They shortlisted 10 architects together with general contractors. And they said, we want to find out what is the cheapest way to construct an apartment building in Switzerland. They made a big market analysis, and they figured out that what you can always rent on the market, no matter how the economy is doing, if it's high or if it's going really down, is small apartments for a very low price. For 1 to 2 person households, that you will always able to rent, you will always get a revenue.
So that was the program. So, but instead of calling the pitch cheap building or maximum profit, they called it sufficiency. Sufficiency, as you all know, is a subcategory of sustainability. It is the part of sustainability that is inversing the perspective on human needs and economics from the idea that you should use as many resources as possible to fulfill your goals, to a reduction, to a minimization or an economical thinking about the resources that you actually need. Sufficiency, of course, it comes from the Latin root, which is about what is sufficient, what is enough. No? So, I mean, later we will talk about that in depth, but of course you can think about the necessity and of sufficiency from a perspective of the economical side, from the human side, what do you really need for living? No? You can also look at it from the building construction side. What does a building, a physical building, really need to be a house? Huh? So these, they left it quite open philosophically, which of these levels apply, and we started to find out more about it during the design process.
So the program was 10 pages, very sufficient. 10 pages. The length of the building was given. It had to be 58 meters, and it had to be 22 meters high, because it's the noise barrier for the lower part of the Boltzhauser Tower. Otherwise, you could not have apartments in that tower. Very bad for the profit. And, you know, we talk maybe a bit juicy about the client, but actually it's a fantastic client. Huh? They're really wonderful. But, yeah, come to that. It's always about relationships. The other thing was that there was a building mass assigned through the master plan by Peter Merkli. They said 1 to 2 person households. They did not specify a number of apartments. They did not specify square meter range. They left that all very open, but they specified one very decisive factor. It was the cost per rentable square meter should be 2,500 Swiss francs, which is very, very low.
So they asked us to team up with the general contractor, excuse me, during the competition. So each team that applied would apply together with the general contractor. We did apply with Anliker from Emmenbrücke from Lucerne. That's a traditional general contractor who comes from the traditional kind of building business of massive construction, while most of our other competitors were teaming up with more kind of progressive wood builders.
And so, yeah, we did this project, which we will explain how it works. So you start, right? Very simple. You have the length, you have the height, you have a mass, you get a volume. And if you want to have as much rentable square meters, you try to avoid everything that takes out of the volume, right? So you try to avoid staircases because they count. So makes 1 staircase, maybe 2 for egress, and you have an open balcony access. You could make 8 floors in this building, so we made 8 floors, and what you end up with is kind of hotel room, bathroom cell inside, balcony access, very depressing 8-story high American motel.
This is in many countries this would be the standard cheapest way of building housing.
And then we checked the building law, and we realized, oh, the cantilevering balconies, they're 3 meters deep. Huh? We need 1.80 meters as a kind of exterior to hang out. That was mandatory through the building law, plus 120 for the egress. So you have 3 meter deep balconies. They cantilever and they cast a virtual shadow. This is virtual. It casts a real shadow, but it's also a virtual shadow. And the virtual shadow, the volume of that counts. So you lose a lot of rentable surface.
So that's what the building law says. So you lose a volume equivalent to the red area. So for the economic balance of this building, that would be terrible.
And then we realized, oh, if we leave out every other balcony, you reduce the red zone. Huh? Almost everything is in the building. And you end up with something that is a bit more than a hotel room because it's on 2 floors. And we were kind of thought, oh, this is good, this leads somewhere, but we were not so happy with the 3 meter cantilevering balconies casting a lot of real shadow on the building. Plus, you see the line to the left, high-rise H. This is Roger Boltzhauser's tower.
It's really
very close. And, you know, this tower goes up, and you have an 8-floor high building, which is quite high, but you just look at the lower portion of that tower. So, okay, we thought, if we step it if we step it, we reduce not only the balconies that cantilever, get in more light, but also all of a sudden we have a building that's opening up towards the sky, looking up to the tower, and it's not a balcony building anymore, but a terrace building. And you still see, we still have these kind of double height loft spaces in there because, okay, sufficiency, you don't need rooms for 1 to 2 people households. You get an idea, a sense that you can use your apartment on the lower floor next to the balcony as a more public zone where people pass by and look in. But on the upper floor, you're actually very private. And then we thought to make it affordable, everything is the same bathroom, the same kitchen, the same staircase, the same hole. Sufficiency, leave away some ceiling. You get a nice double height space. And so you get 4 times the same apartment, but in 4 different sizes. These apartments are like T-shirts. You get them in small, medium, large, and X-large. And also you end up with a very repetitive structure.
Yeah, the plan is basically, this is basically the first building we designed that has no plan. No? There's no ground plan. It's a repetitive structure where you can see that there's one main staircase on the top and another egress staircase on the bottom, and then it's just a series of parallel walls that are wide enough to in theory to accommodate 2 rooms, 2 room access, even though we decided not to have any internal separations and not to have any internal rooms. And as you can see from the left to the right, the building just becomes thinner and thinner. We have been working on housing for the last 17 years, mostly in Zurich, and there has been an excess of complicated floor plans, ever more complicated. We talked about the kind of the Milanese inspiration that kind of got into Zurich and that created an organic overabundance of really, really complex spatial configurations that somehow all were based on the same assumption of a kind of late bourgeois lifestyle. Huh? And that were all based on the idea that every year we could add a few square meters to housing and that the money would just flow and flow. So we try to say this would be the end of the plan. And we have to shed a lot of weight and to leave a lot of assumptions behind in order to get to a place where we can really create affordable housing.
It's also, from the beginning, we were annoyed with the dominance of the plan. We were annoyed that competitions were decided on the plan and just on the plan. Urbanism did almost not exist. You make a very beautiful apartment, you multiply it around the stair core, you get a building, you multiply the building, and you have the same bad settlements that we have since modernism with green spaces in between. No? So from the beginning, actually, we tried to counter that by thinking of urban space, of expression of buildings, how do they relate to different contexts. And so we celebrated the end of the plan. No? We were high-fiving in the office that we actually killed the plan.
So the idea is, this is an image of an installation by Ettore Sozzas, the Mobili Grigi from 1970. What you can see is a gray, quite neutral space with very visibly singular elements of occupation, action, and life, where each element seems to play a role. It's mobile, but also seems to play a specific role within the bare necessities of a life of a human being. So to see in front of your eyes housing not as a conventional series of spaces, but to kind of give space to the possibility of a new inhabitation, that was our idea.
I'm going to guide you through the apartments. This is the X large. It's obviously the biggest one. These apartments, they did not specify the size. And so you can make an X large that is more than 90 square meters, but just for 2 people. The large is around 75. What you can see in both plans or both floors, there is 3 spatial zones. So you enter from the balcony. There's one spatial zone here. There's one there where there's the furniture of a living room. And then there is the double height room that is occupied by the staircase, but there's plenty of space under the staircase as well. That's the third zone. And the same with the L on top, and you see how it's furnished, how you could use it, but it does not prescribe where you have what. This is the same for M. And then small is an exception. Small is just has one spatial zone, and it's very vertical. It's like living in a tower on top of the building.
This idea to reduce the necessity to the max, it's quite an ambiguous expression. We were fighting over the title, whether we should use that title, reduced to the max, in this presentation for you.
It was invented for the first commercials of Smart,
Yeah?
I think, the car. Huh?
No. I thought it was.
I thought it was Nike,
Yeah.
but it's
You
Smart.
felt slightly embarrassed for Smart, right?
Yeah,
but
Nike would be cool.
Yeah, but anyway, Oliver's. I mean, we were fighting about that because what it means to reduce to the max. It reminds me of when I was a student, architectural minimalism was claiming that there was a maximum excess of money and form to suppress all detail. And to create a kind of abstract architecture that would still be very luxurious and extremely expensive. We wanted to do the opposite. We wanted to basically take every element of the building and interrogate it, question it for its performance, its material, and its character, and then put it back into the building, but also allow each element of the building to speak. We are often confronted with apartments that are white and that are uniform. We wanted to make the building elements and the way the building is built actually be expressed and translate that into a promise of freedom, maybe.
So this is the structure of the building. This is a 1:50 model. We always build models in 1:50, and actually this shows the structure, but it also shows our design process. The moment we kind of know how the building's going to look, we build a model like this, where we build all the interior walls, the envelope, a base, and then we start working on the facade. And you can see this does not really prescribe you how to do the facade. Facades they usually don't come from plans, but if you have no plan, you have even not more to hold on to.
But you need an idea for a facade, you need to have an own idea. So you can see that what happened. This is the street facade, which is flat. It's covering 8 floors, but yet, as you can see, it takes the idea of combining 2 floors into one gigantic window that is both behind this window. There's both the double height space and portions of the 2 spaces on the ground floor and on the top floor. By combining these floors into one expression, we are using something that is similar to the classical idea of the colossal order, where in classical architecture you would say, no, I'm not expressing each singular story, but I'm unifying through elements that are visual, one or more stories into one visual entity. So, but the other reason why we did that was the David Goliath problem. The huge tower of Roger Boltzhauser looming behind, and the big tower of Peter Merkley next to it was kind of meant that we have to be like put our chest out, and like Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger, the movie from the 80s. You don't know it. Maybe you can Google it. Where the small Danny DeVito wants to stand up to the big Arnold. So we had to somehow orchestrate a relationship between small and big, between a calm volume of the tower and the figurative quality and energy of our small building.
It also speaks about the relation of size and scale in architecture, Like something that is small in size can be large in scale. This is what we tried to do. The other side is green. This is the garden side. Actually, the site development is very fancy landscape architecture. It's very green. It's not a kind of hardcore tarmac urban space, but it's actually very lush gravel trees. and things. So we tried to show there's a difference on the balcony side in this green, but also in terms of contrast to the red towers. You remember the sketch, the very first sketch, the darkish, very tasteful red two towers, the twin towers. We wanted to be a bit less tasteful and use a color that is more, you know, in between pop culture, industrial color, yeah, maybe American cars or soft ice or something, you know. And we, like that, we also leave the reddishness of the towers be stronger. It's a question of autonomy, you know. If two things are autonomous, confronting each other, maybe there is even more, is more of a dialogue than if one tries to mimic the other or tries to make the other a favor in a certain sense. We certainly did not try to make favors.
So as you can see, in that facade, the typology of the double height unit translates almost in something like a row house. So every inhabitant have their own kind of front yard where they can put furniture. They have an entrance and they have a window entrance area on the lower floor and windows on the upper floor. So there's this memory of the row house and a kind of street in the air.
And then you enter the apartments from outside. You sense the space, you sense the wall in the back going up, the generousness of the space, even though the apartment is small, maybe unusual furniture. It's much more open how you can use these apartments. Also, the X-large are so big, you could put a snooker table in if you want, or you can have a workshop for your bicycles. Or Eric, this is yours, huh, with the guitar.
This is also a good picture to speak about the relationship between neutrality and construction and character. In the competition, we thought that the separation walls between the apartments would be in masonry. The outside facades would be in wood construction. The pillar would be a precast concrete pillar. The stairs would be an industrial staircase that you can order from the internet, and so on. So you can see there's an agglomerate of different functions, different materials, so that you are able, as an inhabitant, you're able to read the genesis, the putting together of the building while you live there. So it's basically putting you in direct dialogue with the building, which we find is an act of dialogue, of liberation, of sensual experience, as opposed to the idea that apartments should be neutral and they should be sanitized and deadened before they become re-inhabited by the people.
And this last image from the competition shows the view from the tower on our building. The view from these luxurious apartments. The tower, by the way, is the first apartment high-rise building in Switzerland constructed in load-bearing wood columns and beams.
Fantastic.
It has very muscular ceilings, a sprinkler system. It's very special. It's very fancy as well. And we knew that. And our ambition was, if you make the cheapest apartment building in Zurich or in Switzerland, can you at least give something, you know, that the people from the tower look down and say, oh, actually, life down there is pretty cool too. And
actually more fun. We imagine that those young bankers who can pay a lot of rent live in the tower, and they look down to those, you know, poorer people down there who enjoy themselves with the beer and, you know, and the sun, and they're like, oh no, I would like to be there, no?
And so then, with this whole scheme was developed together with the general contractor. It was actually quite wonderful, the collaboration. Mm-hmm. We had plenty of meetings together, and then they had to give an offer. And on the last day of the competition, they sent us the calculation of the whole building, and we looked at the fee. Fee was 500,000. We thought that works. You know, building costs 5 to 6 million. 500,000 architecture fee is fair. It's okay. And we managed to have that price, the 2,500 per square meter, and then we won the competition. Because all the other schemes, they kind of stayed on the level of the 8th-floor motel. Some had a bit more balconies on both sides, and some did a bit of construction where the inhabitants should construct the building themselves. which was not appreciated by the client because they said, my God, we're a pension fund, we're not a cooperative, you know, like how the hell are we going to construct an 8th-floor building? So we won. And so we won, you have the first meeting with the general contractor, the client, you talk contract, and then we said, yeah, we were kind of happy with the fee, let's start, you know, and they were like, and they said, but you're sure you're happy? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I mean, $500,000 is decent. And then they said, oh, no, it's not $500,000 for you guys. Huh? It's $500,000 for everyone. Huh? It's $500,000 for this is the architect, this is the general contractor, this is all the engineers. So you end up with around 120. So we're like, oh, shit. We had the 1,000 hours on the project. Yeah. So that's 120.
So then we entered a long conversation with everybody involved, and that you're laughing, which is
no. But Thomas, but we were naive. We were naive, huh? We were very naive. Don't be as naive as we were. We're very naive. You know, you should ask the general contractor. You should say, hey, I want $500,000. You have to put that in the calculation. I don't care if the price is higher than what they expected. You know, because otherwise we're not going to survive. Huh?
So the conversation that ensued took us quite a long time. We ended up...
And consulting. Huh? Consulting. You know, at some point we were quite desperate because the general contractor said, forget it. The client said, forget it, you offered. And so we were worried, you know. And then we called Markus Peter. Yeah. Markus Peter, Miley Peter. Markus Peter is the person who knows how to deal with general contractors. Yeah. That's his story part of the story of his life. And he spoke to us. We both worked for him. He spoke to us so many times about that, so we called him.
Yeah. So he said...
He sighed. Huh? He sighed.
Yeah.
He said, so you didn't ask, you didn't make a claim? I said, no, Marcus, I'm sorry. And he's like, guys. And then he said, okay, it's a war on two fronts. It's a war on two fronts. You have to go against the general contractor, and you have to take the general contractor with you to go against the client. That's what we did.
Yes, and we did that, but there was also a decent human conversation involved that was basically about the question whether low-cost building means low-cost planning. And it was the assumption of everybody involved on the client side was based on the so-called Pareto principle.
It was not that friendly. She said, come on, guys, do it like the Pareto principle.
Yes, okay. I'm just giving the information. Yeah, there was cooperation and aggression involved, both. You know? So they said, you know, you should follow the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle basically says that when you want to in order to reach 80% of the result, you have to put 20% of the energy in. And for the last 20% of the result, you need 80% of the energy.
But Thomas, this is the full principle. She just said, you know, 20% of the energy gives 80% of the result. Do it like this.
Yeah.
That was the conversation. And then we were like, oh my God, you know, and she did not mention the other side. Huh?
And so we basically said, look, and this is probably something you should listen to now, because this is quite important for your future. And look, we are not here to decide how many percentage of results we're going to give you, because as architects, we are responsible to 100% to deliver a building that performs. So we have to go to the end. We are responsible by contract. And if we agree on putting less energy in, and there's a problem and the water leaks in, you're going to call your very good lawyer and destroy us. No?
And the general contractor.
And the general contractor. So we had to fight for some time, and in the end, they all understood that their illusion of building cheaply means planning cheaply, and we get to the details in a minute, is an illusion. And they finally accepted it, and we gave them some discount, but they gave us the proper fee for the work. And now let's go to the practical development of the project, Oliver, because we kind of left that out. Huh?
What do you mean?
The process in which we looked at each
Yeah,
single element.
let's do that during the images. Huh?
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, also, when we had these discussions, you know, we said we are planners, you know. We are planners. We are responsible for everything. The architecture you get for free, you know. You pay us for the liability. The architecture, you know, it's already there.
Yeah. For the plumbing that works, and also for the toilet that works, and that it doesn't rain in. No?
And it's kind of nice that the architecture only, you know, is for free. No,
No, it's terrible, but it's a fact.
Okay.
Because you can plan a shitty building and get the same fee.
So to plan this building, you know, we thought, great, we go in with the general contractor, they know how to make the cheapest building. Very simple. Huh? It's also a simple building.
Experts.
They're experts, yeah. That's also what clients always think, that general contractors are experts. No? They were great, but they had no clue how to do it.
Yeah. Because it's not to bash them, but it was really, really interesting. When we met with them like 5, 6, 7 times during the design process, even during the competition phase, each time we were kind of showing alternatives to the very traditional way of doing an efficient construction, and they were out of their field of comfort and they couldn't find the answers. So you have to imagine that the way buildings are built in this country and in Europe in general is really efficient from a certain point of view of construction. But once you leave that standard construction procedure, suddenly everybody is out there in the field of unknown. And that was so fascinating. The field of gravitation towards a standard way of building was so strong that we needed a lot of energy to depart from that. So we basically, in our minds, we took the building apart. Every element, every wall, every material, we looked at it in terms of cost, performance, durability, but not only this. We had to look at it in terms of how is it constructed. How many days is the GRU, the machine, standing? How long is it? How much is the rent for the GRU to stand? Or even further, how many, if we thought about prefab ceiling elements in concrete, that would be great because you can build really fast. But it turned out that in this small country, in Switzerland, there are only 2 companies that produce them. So the market doesn't play. So you don't get a cheap price. So it was out. So the entire building process was part of this thinking about the price and the kind of optimization of the project. So it was basically, in the end, like developing a Formula 1 car, no? Where you put every little screw made from carbon fiber onto the balance and see whether it's 2 gram or 2 gram 50. No?
What everybody could agree on from the beginning is that plastic windows is the cheapest window. But they're a standalone product, you know. The difference between a window in wood, a window in aluminium, or mixed or hybrid is none for how it's mounted, how it's manufactured, how it comes inside, how many people can deliver such a piece. So the plastic window was the cheapest one. We tried to get German windows, but the Germans were not interested. It's also good for the client because the Germans are not liable in Switzerland. You know, they deliver. If something breaks, you never get them back. The only thing I have to say in favor for everyone is what they did not squeeze out the last drop of money was the facade. Because the facade it is quite an affordable facade. It's an Eternit facade. These are the smaller corrugated Eternit waves. The wavy ones only need 1 piece of substructure, not 2 layers of substructure, so there's less money in that.
Because they have a stiffness in themselves, no?
Charlotte, also Eternit's actually, you know, it's cement in it. That's the only reuse we have. They are next to a paper factory, and they use a lot of the trash of the paper factory, mix it with cement and glass fibers from China, instead of asbestos, to manufacture these things. No? But everything is just next to them, the cement and the paper trash. It's also a very light material, so you don't need a lot of structural reinforcement. The structure behind, we thought we could build it out of wood elements because, you know, sufficiency, sustainability was always a theme, and the Penzim was really into that, really interested in pushing that. But this facade is the one that's facing the noise. So you would have needed a piece of Duri panel, which would make the wood much more expensive. And so in the end, it became brick panels that were prefabricated, insulated, and then you have the facade construction on top. You kind of see the tower on the construction in the back, but you actually also see that it looks like a 4-story building, and that depending on light, the two colors play out much stronger or become a bit more unified. The balustrades are all made with iron grills. It's the ones that you see on shafts. This is a semi-product that it's made to measure. They're stiff, they come, you just have the pillars in between. The metal builder was sure this is the cheapest railing, which is nice. We really like it. It's also, this building is so robust that we could also exchange a lot of materials. For instance, on the terraces, we wanted to make the same iron grills. Would have probably been a nightmare for cleaning, but really beautiful. The surface of wall and floor, but you can also just have the cheapest concrete panels, and I think it works really well.
And we also had to replace the cladding of this green facade. We initially wanted wood, but for fire escape reasons that was not possible. So it's now basically also small pieces of it in it that are mimicking the wood. The funny thing, now you can see the facade. The funny thing or not so funny thing is that in each step of the design, because the stepping is equal, the section has a mathematical precision to it. You know? It's like a formula. So whenever you had to change one depth of one piece of the building, you had to adapt the entire building, plus its usage, plus its calculation. So while it looks simple, it's an absolutely unforgiving project, you know? Because there's zero tolerance for difference, for irregularity.
But however, remember the night before submitting.
Yeah.
The night before submitting, we had doubts. The big doubt was, do the staircases now count to the volume or not? Because in the Zurich building laws, it says public spaces within a building are not part of the volume. They're not accountable. And we calculated on that. And then somebody told us, forget it, you know. It counts because a staircase is not a public space. It's not an atrium or something, you know. There's a very big compendium for 600 francs that explains the Zurich building law. We bought it after this competition and look it up every time now, not to make mistakes again. But we realized, so we panicked, you know. We panicked. The thing was done, more or less. And then we just took it on the paper. We calculated how much we need to cut out and just shifted the volume like this.
Yeah, we cut the section and glued it together, you know, a bit closer.
I think it was kind of a centimeter or something,
yeah, it was a centimeter,
on the 1:50 drawing. Yeah? And then we changed the whole drawing set in 5 hours. It said you can't do that with a Gaccia Domignoni plan.
Freedom of frugality. So we are in the middle of that question. So what is the result? What are we looking at? Let's look at the building and then judge. You know, are we looking at a model where we are forced into a kind of self-imposed poverty, or is it a promise of freedom that we are looking at? You know, what is it exactly what we have been doing? It's not a rhetorical question that I will answer to you, but it's a real question. You can see here that there's no render on the walls. There's a simple wooden floor. There's a precast concrete pillar. And there is a standard spiral staircase that's also quite funny. It's a spiral staircase that you can basically order from the internet. But then when the bidding went out, our favorite metal builder, an excellent company, got the job and he just decided to hand make a replica of this mail order staircase. So it's a bespoke copy of a mail order staircase.
The concrete is the roughest you can have in Switzerland. It kind of, comes as it is. You can see it a bit in the ceiling. There's lots of drips on the wall, which is actually quite beautiful. They're like wallpaper. Kitchen is formica cladding. They had 4 colors in the lowest price range. Luckily, they had silver. The rest was very ugly greens. The mirror behind the kitchen is price neutral to a piece of glass, which the kitchen builder said is the most affordable thing to do. So we're very happy with the mirror because it reflects what's happening on the terraces when you sit. Also, it gives a kind of nice focal point. The render that is on the brick walls is just one coat of render. It's just, in German you call it the Grundputz. So it has no finishing coating. It's quite rough and painted. This there that Thomas explained. The sockles. You see sockles. It's cheaper to have a sockle than to have a minimal kind of joint because there's less precision in how the wood goes to the wall. So it's faster to construct.
This is the upper floor.
So many people told us, wow, we love this building. I mean, these apartments are fantastic. And we always said, hey, if you want an apartment, very happy to help, because for us that's great. When people visit, we can always show. And they were all like, no. Building is great, but we're not going to move to Regensdorf. I don't quite understand, because it has 2 24-hour shopping just next door, it's not so bad. And there's quite a lot of landscape, plus the airport very close by.
Oliver, we're looking at a moment where the perception, what is outside the city and what's inside, is rapidly changing. So maybe in a few years, Regensdorf, which is only like 16 minutes from the main train station, is considered part of the city. Zurich is really quite conservative in terms of what it considers city center. You can literally take a tram for 5 minutes out of Zurich, and you feel like you're on the edge of the city. And this, of course, has to do with the decision not ever to build a subway, but instead to build only S-Bahn, suburban trains, that led to this incredible sprawl into the landscape around Zurich.
I think this idea of how you live in these apartments, the kind of openness to it, is an inclusive idea of how to live. This assemblage of different materials and the openness of the space, to us, does not prescribe with what kind of furniture you move in. So we have friends living there. He's an architect working for Lütjens and Bates. She's a graphic designer. They have very, very exquisite taste. They have really nice furniture. The people next door are physicists, students. It's their first apartment that they have together. It's all IKEA furniture plus big game computers. Not because they game, but because they're physicists. They need calculation power. And it's equally nice. People were tinkering with the kitchen because it has just 4 elements, so they constructed their own things. The physicist made a big kitchen island instead of a table, and the table is next to it. You don't need an Eames chair to move in. I would say in a Valerio Olgiati building, if you have IKEA furniture, it's a real problem. And John Parson gave a lecture at ETH when I was a student, and showing his super minimal flat. He said, and then it was Christmas, and we bought a Christmas tree, and the Christmas tree looked really bad. And then I realized there could be a problem with my work.
Yeah.
This is the S apartment.
You can see how literally the staircase moves towards the facade.
The main staircase. The elevator, there's one elevator. It's as big so that you can bring your bicycle up. And then there is,
the post boxes, yeah.
Post boxes, and I wanted to talk about the flaps, Thomas. The facade. The facade, as you saw, there is flat pieces in the facade, and then there is things where the Eternit is tilted out, huh? And it becomes very volumetric. It's a great plasticity to it. As we said, it's very thin. The Eternit is, I think, 6 millimeters, so it's a surface, it's a cladding. But the way we use it in this building is sometimes you tilt it out, as you can see on the, or maybe see it better in this one. It's held out of the facade to cast a shadow, whereas on the inside it's very flat. So this is about visual moments, about uniting several plates, because the plates are that wide, into one big piece. This has nothing to do with construction, this has only to do with architecture. It's about the scale, it's about plasticity, it's about light and shadow. This lower part is about kind of giving a base, having more articulation versus the street space. And luckily also what are they called? These guys who, when you do the building permit, they're the Ortsbildgruppe.
Yeah, they're the kind of building committee of the village.
Yeah, they said in the comments to the building permit, they said needs distinct Sockel zone.
Yeah. So
distinct Sockel zone. So building laws is usually helpful.
And of course, we are very interested in the question how surface and mass, how they interrelate. We're really interested in the question whether lightness can create mass, and also to show the way how things are built, so the thinness of things. We think that the thinness of things opens, if you express the thinness of elements, it opens up possibilities for a new sensibility in architecture, because it's basically, we find bringing buildings closer to the human eye, because you're not imposing weight, but you're showing the vulnerability and fragility of a construct.
It's a kind of like when we speak, the tone of the voice is often more important than the words that we use. So,
whose gain? So it was when the building was almost done, and the client was going on the market, as you say. We were.
Shall we first talk about housing?
Housing?
Yeah.
The housing.
Yeah.
Okay. As you know, maybe if you dealt a little bit with housing, now housing at the moment, it's really at a crossroads of different factors. Huh? Housing today has to deal with three things. Housing today has to deal with the economy. How do you get affordable housing? Housing has to deal in some ways with community, which means what kind of living together are we offering? Who are we addressing? How do we address the problem of loneliness? How do we address the generational divide? How do we address affordability in certain ages, the old age and the young age? And the third one, of course, is sustainability. Which are the resources that can we responsibly use to build and maintain a building? And this is where we are in the center. And so we would like to discuss with you where this building stands. Huh? And we are really not quite sure where exactly it stands, because what happened when this building got rented out was that we were promised, before it was rented out, we were promised, or we were told.
Hang on.
Hang on.
Let's first talk about the construct of everything. Yeah?
The construct of it?
Yeah. So
this is the marketing.
This is the marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and this slide is specifically for Nina the dog, who's in the front row. Thank you for coming. There was an insane amount of marketing. They had 3 marketing offices that changed during the construction of the building. So this is kind of a preliminary thing, but it was the cutest that they did. There's a gigantic website. They did 2 films so far over the whole site. They're going to publish a book.
They had artists.
They buried a whole museum grave under our building. and we were always the guys with the smallest fee. The low-cost guys have made a cool project, but actually we did not profit. The graphic designers are from Paris, you know, like for the whole signage, it's everything is very, very fancy. And then I just gonna maybe go back because otherwise you're gonna get sick. And then the month before we finished the building, they went on the market. And the week before, we asked them, so how much are the apartments going to be? This is off record, even though we're filming. But they were like, we tried to rent the smallest below 1,000 a month. So we thought, wow, that's for Zurich, it's amazing. It's really good. 40 square meters for below 1,000.
The result of low-cost building.
They went on the market, and it was 1,400. The smallest one. And so you realize, probably they did not miscalculate the first Excel sheet. So they upped the profit. And so that's the smallest one, and the biggest I think is 2,500, the X large. And so then you are like, okay.
Whose gain is that?
Yeah.
Who are we doing the exercise for? What kind of innovation are we looking at, you know? What does frugality mean? Whose frugality is it? Is your kind of authentic lifestyle becoming a luxury? Or, you know, what are we looking at?
But Thomas, it's still a pension fund. They need to make a revenue, and it pays pension of plenty of people.
Yes, that's the pact with the devil we are all in, right? That this is that basically the people who pay high rents pay their high rents with their pensions that they receive from a similar pot.
In the end, the 1,400 was still below what you would usually have in Regensdorf. So it still happened that journalists came in the biggest newspaper in Switzerland and wrote, this is how you do affordable housing.
Yeah.
You know? But it's different. We work a lot for cooperatives or foundations that do social housing, and there it's the cost of the building equals the rent. So the lower the building price, the lower the rent.
But we have to admit that some of the cooperatives we work with, they are not nearly as progressive in their experimental idea than the Pensimo. So life is complicated. This world is really complicated. No? So they were not only, during the development, they were not only interested in keeping the costs low, but once they saw the project, they were interested in doing the best possible project. They were defending the kitchens, they defended every element, every architectural element against doubters and, you know, people with a red pen and so on. So that was quite incredible. So we are, and why was that so? It's probably so because they have a good leadership. They have a lot of, you know, really competent people who take responsibility, real responsibility and joy in their projects, which is not always the case, no? In this world out there. So it becomes really quite contradictory and lots of mixed messages, you know, that we're encountering here. No?
What did we gain? I mean, you do this competition. You realize during the competition, this has not been done before. There are terrace typologies, but I don't know, show me. I don't know a single building that is like this one. And so, of course, you want to construct it. You know, you're an architect. It fell into our laps, no? You also want to know how it feels, you know, how the space, or how people live in. You want to know everything, right?
And while the building permit, the plan, and some of the permits that allowed us to combine, for example, these terraces with these egress spaces, are very specific to this village and would not be permissible in, like in the city of Zurich, for example. This could be also a model. I mean, maybe this could be a model a typological model that could be applied in other places, you know?
By the way, this was one of the points in the brief.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention, they said the project should be scalable and multipliable, which it obviously is. I mean, its length is only defined by the perimeter. It could be much longer, it could be shorter, it could have a floor more, could have less stepping, different stepping. Yeah.
So the architecture of you can see the happy architect with the model, and the happy architect is always is very happy when he or she finishes a project, but it also leaves behind a trace of many mixed feelings about reality, money, social goals, and so that we still sort out for ourselves, and that we're still trying to digest. And I think we are at the end of our presentation.
No.
Not yet?
There's
No.
other people who gain.
Okay.
There's-
I didn't know
there's,
this. I've never seen this.
Oh yeah, this is our friends who live. This is Barthelemy, Romeo the cat. So they live together also with Bruno the cat, but Bruno is very shy. He's usually hiding somewhere. And Elisabetta. Right before Christmas, they have quite a special Christmas tree. Yeah, but I think it works in the apartment. They are very, very happy, and also the Pensimo invests a lot in the social thing of the building. They have a social coach. They do events together. The S floor and the M floor are rented out to singles, and the large and the X large are rented out to couples, and the two X larges are rented out to families because, and that also we forgot to say, oh shit. All good, Cyril. Your computer did not get it. They're 6 meters wide, so you can insert in the upper floors, you can insert rooms. We decided on that during the competition because we were not sure if somebody would expect the loft space. So when we constructed, we had 3 apartments of the XL with the rooms. You still have an open gallery space, and then just 2 bedrooms facing the quiet, the green side. And they rented out first. The others did not rent because the price probably was too high, but also, I mean, you live on a construction site because the Boltzhauser is still ongoing, and it's just dirt in front of your apartment. So they fitted out the others with rooms too, and they rented as well.
And the social figure of the building is now very interesting. As Oliver mentioned, the small apartments on the upper floor that are rented to singles, they have this very active chat group, and they are constantly meeting for aperos.
The M's are organizing the aperos.
And there's a guy at the end of the M who organizes the aperos, while the couples keep more to themselves. But in the S and the M, there are already more than one kind of love relationship, has been created over the balcony. And also the cats of the different apartments keep visiting each other, over the balcony. So as a social space, it's still experimental and going on, and we are curious to see how it's continuing.
This is Christmas decoration. So yeah, I mean, we're very happy to have provided a home for people, and that actually this promise that we thought would be in it actually seems to work so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're very happy to take questions, et vous
Yes.
pouvez aussi parler en français, hein, ça va.
Thank you for this fantastic lecture. Very, very candid, but very enjoyable. I mean, actually, I have to say that you remind me once a lecture by Gilbert and George that I attended something like 20 years ago. I mean, you had the same grace and humor, and which was incredibly enjoyable. I don't know if there are questions. Yes?
So I was wondering if you could change how architects think and how they respond to today's challenges, what would it be? Is it like finding the perfect balance between those 3 main points you mentioned, like economy, sustainability, and community? And how do we get that into politics? And the other question would be, do you think a Christmas tree would look better in your building compared to one by John Pawson?
I answered the second question. You can answer the first.
Okay, okay. The first was really more complex. I mean, you know, if for us, every project is a journey where a set of constellations are at the beginning of that journey, and that will also define how economy, sustainability, and social issues, how they are related. Huh? Often that is not direct. That is not a philosophical question. That of course we have our attitudes and also our values, but it's often not completely up to us to decide how these elements interrelate. But however, when we start to design, we sometimes discover a certain wiggle room, a space of operation between these three things, where we can find a way to go to combine things. For example, one example is what can you not build? Which materials, elements do you not have? Internal walls, stucco, all these things that you don't do, and suddenly you gain something, maybe on the social side, maybe on the sustainability side. So I think it's for us in every project, it's a reconfiguration and a negotiation between these factors. Especially the social and the sustainability question, it's linked with cost. That's a unsolvable problem at the moment without politics, because in the end the question of whether it's done for a profit or not is deciding on so many aspects. Whether you are building for a cooperative, whether you're building for an investor, and how do they deal with the question of the maximum profit or not maximum profit. Not a very straightforward answer. And
so second answer, yes, absolutely. Christmas trees look much better in our buildings. We actually have a plastic TV test that we proud ourselves that it's absolutely possible to move in with the ugliest stuff that you have, big plastic TVs, Nintendos, toys of all kinds, and that it actually works. I would say, though, that we design buildings that are not that good for that kind of stuff. But we're learning, too.
Appropriate the gallery for themselves? How do they use it the way you intended it for? Or did they use it in a different way or not quite the right way? I was wondering.
They use it completely different than we intended. You see a bicycle every now and then. Some have very big plastic sofas there, and actually one has a gym. The guy in the M at the very end, he has no people passing by, so he has like a gym for, as if you would be in Venice Beach in Los Angeles, Muscle Beach. That's his hobby. However, there's much less furniture on the balconies than we thought. I think there's two reasons. First is it's a construction site all around. It's very loud and there's a lot of dust. So you have to wait until the Boltzhauser Tower is done. The other thing, which we don't quite know how to deal with yet, is between our building and the tower, there's a lot of wind. And it kind of channels the wind that fall down from Hunkeberg, and there was a very severe storm, and everything just got blown over the terraces. So now people took everything in because they've been worried about those winds, and so are we. Let's see. We're not quite sure what we should do to break the wind.
Thank you.
But this is something happening on the urban plan, you know? And
in a lot of the pictures you you showed, a lot of the people had these kind of design furnitures. It seems you were mentioning there was graphic designers and other architects. So I was just curious as to the demographic that was renting. Are most people attracted for the design or?
No.
No?
No, actually there's only one architect living there. But they're very young.
Yeah, the demographic they were aiming at was 30-somethings professionals, no? And that mid-30s, they were aiming at at an income level that was, you have to give your income before renting, right? You need a minimum income, of course, that's in relationship to the rent, but they were aiming for not for higher incomes, but really for that range, adaptive range. But in the end, like a 20-something rented it for the most part. Huh?
Yeah.
So most people are between 25 and 30 years old. Huh?
A lot of students,
Yeah.
which surprised us because, but you know, a room in a shared apartment in Zurich is around 1,000, maybe a bit more. So, but a lot of students took the 1,400 apartment, and with the bus, you're quite good at ETH Hunkeberg. So maybe that's also part of the reason. Yeah.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. I'm interested to know more about your relation with the contractors, or like, does the fact that it was affordable, cheap construction, like did you kind of calculate all these material choices and everything in like with the contractors, or does it influence compared to other projects that you did that were less about also the economy of construction? Like how does it influence it? And yes, and also in terms of labor, what the economy also made on those labors of on site, or just on materials choices, and like what was the kind of part between labor, economies, material, and how you calculate it with the contractors or without it?
So the collaboration between the contractor and us was symbiotic. There was a really great architect on the contractor side, and she worked perfectly together with the architect on our side. That was absolutely wonderful. So decisions were made very quickly.
And the cost calculation was already very precise during the competition, even though the price that they had given was too low in the end, because after the competition, the Russian invasion in Ukraine happened. There was a lot of material shortage, and as you all know, the prices went up incredibly. But the calculation started right during the competition phase, and as regards to labor, there is. We don't think that there is a lot of wiggle room in terms of labor. You can. The labor is very expensive in Switzerland. So in the end, the wiggle room or the flexibility to build cheaply in Switzerland is different from other European countries. Here, to abide to the norms and rules, you have to build to a very high standard. So as opposed to other countries in Europe where you can build a very cheap version of basically the same building or a very expensive version of the building, here in Switzerland you can only buy cheaply by really taking fundamental decisions on typology and equipment and size. Basically, this is it. So that's in other words, for us as architects, this is really a nice situation, because Eric, for example, you're working in Paris, and I know that you have incredible cost pressures on social housing, and I guess there you can build more cheap, while here you have to reinvent things to actually build cheaply.
Yes.
So general contractor sounds like big and powerful, and they are, but in the end it's a people's business, you know. You deal with people one-to-one, and that really influences how things go. So it was really wonderful here.
I liked a lot the metaphor of the David versus Goliath, or the Vito of Schwarzenegger, if you want, which was even more fun. In the way you presented the building, which seems to me an interesting one, and explains a lot of things also to a certain kind of wave of architects that stands like really as a form of resistance towards these big projects like Boltzhauser, in your case, is building a big tower, but at the same time you have other examples in Zurich. Along the SBB railway, you have on the one side the super high-rise towers of the Europe Halle, and the other hand you have the Zoll House, which is have many similarities somehow with your architecture. And to a certain extent, it seems that this metaphorical play is also trying to introduce within the agenda of design, apart from typological research in terms of housing, also research in terms of architectural language. It seems that when a building is small, and its smallness is trying to be an act of, let's say, reaction towards something very big, the only way to make this building, let's say, be present or to express its presence is also the linguistic part, let's say. So the facade, the use of colors, the use of, let's say, the Ethernet somehow, in the same way also in the Zoll House. So I wonder, yes, the question could be in general on your work, how important it is the facade, and do you think that could be resetted again in the architecture agenda, in the agenda of architecture design, let's say?
Yes, the facade is the public face of architecture, isn't it? You know, we can show you one apartment here. Actually, we just did on Saturday with Eric and Sophie and a bunch of like 40 students. But usually you just walk by the city and you don't see the apartments. You cannot access, you don't even know. You also maybe don't want to know. But the facade is what actually makes the public space, no? It's maybe the volume, the positioning of the building, but the way urbanism is treated in Switzerland, certainly since, you know, since Diener and Diener, is volumetric compositions. But you know, we also, this here, everything was given, the site was given, so it's all about the facade, yeah? And that's a culture on its own. If you go to Florence, the Renaissance Palazzi, they have very messy plans. The Palazzo Rucellai, which is one of the nicest, is five buildings built together, very
no
messy
plan at all.
Yeah, wonderful facade. Huh?
And we feel that there's, even though everything seems to come together well, the structure and the facade, we develop facades as an autonomous element. We know that we need our own idea for the facade. And we know that as a culture, we are more competent in doing plans than doing facades. So we have to put extra energy into the facades. You know, you need to put 60% into the facade of energy to make it work, to bring it to a cultural level that's high enough. Because as a generation, and I'm including you, even the next generation, you're not good enough in the facades yet. So you have to work harder on the facades, because your competence in the plan is kind of, you know, in your blood. While the facades, I'm a bit disappointed when I walk around.
It's also, we're in a moment of time where buildings try to be very light and invisible almost.
Yeah.
The glass is invisible, steel is invisible, high tech is invisible. They're kind of ashamed that they're here, so they try to disappear. But these buildings are going to be here and they're going to stay for a long time, hopefully. So we better work on the culture of what they mean. And
ecology and sustainability is not a way to escape the question of what the facade is like, you know, because some architects seem to start to hide behind like sustainability, when designing facades, but we think that's
and buildings.
No, I mean my question was a bit in the. So now it was very interesting, the presentation. You really wore the suit of a nearly dirty realism of explaining it, the building very much to the, to its economics and the very pragmatic decisions you made. But at the same time, well, I know you, that you're extremely passionate about, architecture, culture in large, and you could have explained perhaps this building in an entirely different way, just by the kind of things that motivate you as architects. And I know that inevitably at the end these two things come together. But so it's just offering you the opportunity to tell us more about, what are the things that you were looking at when designing this building, and if that had any currency at all in the process, because
I mean, I like when you, Oliver, said, okay, show me a building like this. I haven't seen anyone, and I think that's the case for several buildings. I think that's the beauty of architecture, is always specific enough to require a specific answer, but we see cousins and brothers, like, you know, the tradition of the Laubengang buildings. I am thinking about, you know, early nouvelles, but also, you know, other things. So can you tell us more about, you know, the cultural, architectural motivations that you had designing this, and did that had any currency, or did it help at all in the process?
I mean, it's the explanation, Alfredo. The explanation how the section was generated, right, in the different steps. That's really the truth. Huh? So there was, of course, there was a fascination with the stepping, but that was really a step-by-step rational process. And once we had that result, once we had that section, we of course recognized Adolf Loos's stepped villas or stepped unbuilt projects. We saw Fischer von Erlach's, you know, Babylonian gardens. We saw all these things, but it was already kind of locked in place. No? Of course, we understood that there was what then happened in terms of our interest in this building, and where we departed from all the examples, was the different treatment of the different facades. You know, you can, if you remember the model, you can understand a building as a building volume that is uniform in its surface. No? But you can also understand a building as a construct that's assembled by different facades from different size. And that is really the case of this building. If you remember the short facades, there's a lapping of Eternit, but which is quite flat, and it creates a continuous surface. While the straight big street facade has a lot of deep expression and lapping. It has this colossal order, huh? And I think this was the hardest to do, huh? to find the scale, the right scale for this facade. We were first trying the opposite. We were first trying to do a kind of Pouillon facade with hundreds of windows, you know, that somehow exaggerate the number of stories. But then we turned the switch and turned it into a colossal order. Huh? And then the other facade, the courtyard facade, where you remember the two openings that create a kind of row house, right, with a little canopy in between. That was really interesting. That came about in relationship to the other facade. When you remember, the other facade has a opening, and the opening has a specific width. So when you imagine the space from inside, how do you relate that one opening to the other? So we decided that the width of these openings, while the character of the facade is completely different, would be the same, no? To have a kind of some stability in the space, no? To have an amount of wall that's equal on both sides. No? And then we transformed this vertical slip by inserting this little canopy in the middle into two windows. But maybe you can go back, it still remains ambiguous, you know? Because if you take from the green facade,
what do you want to show?
The green facade?
Oh.
Here, if you would take away this little canopy that separates the two windows, you would end up with one continuous opening. But still, for the eye, there's an ambiguous character, whether this is actually one opening with something inserted, or whether it's two openings. So there was a search for an internal relationship between the two facades and the scales. No? I think that was really an important motivation. And then, of course, flatness here, flatness versus the very corrugated depth of the other facade. No? And flatness, we related flatness to the proximity to the tower. No? When you have flatness, there's a kind of reserve, you know, to the surface, which responds to the tower that's nearby. But on the other side, on the street, there's a lot of air, you know, towards the landscape in the other buildings. So you can allow yourself to have a very deep, you know, modulated facade. No?
But
like, like when you are in a city and you have a very narrow street, and then you need a flatness of the facade. It works really well because you are always close. But when you have a building that's facing a large landscape and you see it from 100 meters distance, a flat facade is just not valid. It disappears. So these things were quite important in our thinking about the facades. Huh?
But also on another level, we don't pin up mood boards in the office to kind of frame a cloud around the building. We have absolute doubts in that working method. However, we have, of course, a love for very specific architecture. I would say architecture is a very personal thing, even though it's also a very public thing. So, of course, this facade would not be possible without our love for American vernacular, John Haydock, Venturi Scott Brown, Renaissance architecture, Diener and Diener, Aldo Rossi, Giorgio Grassi,
Sozzas,
Ettore Sozzas, pop art, like all kinds of things that are part of a kind of ongoing research. What?
Luca.
No, but this, Luca, this is accumulated over 17 years of practice, and that's what I'm saying. We're not going to put them behind the building, we also work step by step. So things you see in this building, we've tried out in other buildings or projects in a maybe different way,
I know, but it sounds almost like life, that you have a moment of reaction, but you respond with all your traumas and all your experiences that you have on your back. It's not that
yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah. But this is for the students. It's important to know what you like, because it will help you to make design decisions. And it will help you to find your own personality, your own kind of voice. Your cousins and friends and families.
Thank you. Yes, it's important to know what we like, and sometimes it's also important to be careful about that. And I mean, it's important.
No, but love is without care, Eric. No,
Yeah,
love is only great when you let go. No,
you open your heart.
No, I mean, it's important also to articulate your own obsessions and love with reality. And I have the feeling that with this building, under the pressure of such a high constraint, I like the way you explain the building, and I was lucky enough for you, for Oliver explaining us last Saturday on site. But it's almost automatic. It's almost an automatic writing. And I have the feeling it has helped you to maybe escape some of your obsessions or to grasp your obsession on reality in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I see this building in your whole body of work as maybe something announcing a shift or something. It's very interesting to me to see this evolution. And it's exactly the kind of psychedelic rationality I like very much. So and the result is amazing. I would like to ask you, do you think you have invented or, I don't know, let's say invented or conceived 4 types? I like the way it's made automatic. It's smaller and smaller, let's say. Do you have, among those types, do you have one favorite one? Do you think the small one, which I suspect is maybe your favorite one, it would be mine probably, but do you think it could be could it be smaller?
No.
And do you think it's then a kind of co-op simmer for nowadays? Or how can you develop about the which one do you prefer? And do you think you have invented 4 types, or maybe the XL and X are more or less the same? But after a while, you mentioned that the S, for instance, cannot have the same amount of different spaces, of course, because it's too tight. So how many types do you think this building has?
So when we did the tour before the building was occupied, we could see all the apartments. So I would usually start on the L floor, because it works very well to explain how the 3 spatial zones and all that works.
So the 75.
Yeah. Then you go up to the M, it's the same thing, but you realize it's smaller. But it still works. Huh? And then you know, then you can, it's the same idea, the same concept. And then you go to the S, and then I always said, okay, but actually this is my favorite apartment. You know? If I, you know, would have to live alone, that's where I would go. Because it's just so wild. Huh? It's so vertical. It's 5 meter 80 high, and you look down into the space to the gas stations. No, it's wow. And you can see the Alps on both sides.
But and the kind of formula, the geometric formula really starts at the top. The minimum size of the bathroom, the depth of the kitchen, and the handicapped space in front of the kitchen is defining exactly on the centimeter the depth of the top apartment. Huh?
Yeah. So it can't be smaller.
It can't be not a centimeter smaller. So the rest is a kind of, and if you then have the height of the building, the length of the building, and the volume, you can calculate the steps. That's it. And then you have basically, if you said they're equal steps, then you know exactly what the steps are. So there is really a kind of automatic writing, of course, one where we had to figure out the formula with a lot of work. You know?
But then at the end, you go down to the X large. And the X large, the ground floor is 20 centimeters higher than all the other floors because it's on the ground floor. And it has so much space. You're shocked by how much space it has. And you see endless possibilities of what could be possible. So I'd say, you know, there's 3 types. There's the L and the M who are very similar. The S is a wild thing on top, and the XL has just so much belly.
And why is it 20 centimeters higher? It's the same problem like in the cupola of St. Peter's, you know. The original design was a half sphere, no? And when you cut a half sphere and you put it on the table or in the cityscape of Rome, for the eye, it looks clumsy. It looks like a cake that's kind of melting. Huh? For the eye, you have to pull it up just a little bit. And that's what was done. So also the volume, if you have a mathematical calculation of the steps, they're all the same height. And we did test it. And you pull it, you make the ground floor a bit higher, you lift it up just a little bit. For the eye, that is satisfying. That is finally satisfying your eye and creating a sense of equality. Otherwise, the ground plane would create a pressure that would give you the impression that the ground plane was actually squeezed and lower. It's really interesting. So that's the problem of mathematical order versus the order that you can perceive by the eye.
I would ask them. Thank you. So first, for me, I would say it's not three different types. For me, it's more the Daltons, and they are one part of one family. This 4 Lucky Luke competitors. Every time the Daltons, they are every time looking. You will never say they are different types. You will also say that they are a family. But first, 2 things I would mention. One is interesting for the students, I think, because you did an amazing lecture with 2 persons talking to each other and presenting a project and not to battle in between. So it was very, let's say, very enlightening for me to listen to you. So that's very difficult usually to do lectures in a team, which is, I think, also good for the students to observe that, reading in between the lines, how you also shared your comments and your doubts.
Our design process is the same, huh?
That's super. And that's why I would ask this question maybe, because I saw amazing detail and I like also your way as the architecture gets very close to the paperwork, and that is also gets in reality, and really it has a kind of third dimension. And there was this amazing detail when the rain tube comes through this kind of paper, let's say declinated Eternit thing. And then we made very fast a double check on your ground plans, and we found 80,000 Swiss francs, what you not mentioned out of this. And for me, it's interesting where you went to the limits of this, because you talked a lot about this question of money and how the price is made there. But still at the end, you used very traditional bathrooms in your project. For me, it's the question why, because we did once a study, how many square meters Switzerland was hiding behind drywalls and bathrooms. And at the end, it's per last 5 years, it's 20,000 apartments what we hiding behind drywalls. And I think coming from that detail there, you still have this very traditional bathroom with this 20 centimeter drywall. The things are attached to the wall. You have even a wall which is clothing the bathroom with a kind of 15 centimeter drywall in the plans, readable like this. You don't need the separation. You just need maybe a curtain, something. Immediately you gain 1 square meter per apartment. You have 32 apartments. Immediately, if I would play the general contractor, I turn this in this kind of Dutch minimalism, even to go further. So is there something which you had in your design process, what you had also as a dream to go even to jump over this kind of limit, what you couldn't realize due to that maybe habits of persons or the doubts of the general contractor, of the owner itself, which you couldn't realize? So this kind of hidden stories behind, which not came to the construction site?
Actually, I don't think so. I mean, there was debates of how much you're going to construct and how much you're going to let people construct themselves. So, for instance, not constructing the bathrooms, but just have fixtures. The client said we want a fully functional apartment, so that's also why we built the kitchen. I'm not sure we could have left it open as a bathroom, like just don't do the wall. I'm not sure it's possible for hygienious reasons. I'm not sure. Certainly the size of the bathroom is through disability code. But
disability doesn't work in that building, so.
no, it does work.
It works,
the staircase is 1 meter 10 wide on the inside, so you could install a lift if somebody is in a wheelchair. We had, in the competition, we had smaller chairs, but then you need an elevator next to it, and so you kill the space. And we thought that's not fair. So if you make a wide stair, you can have a stair lift inside, but also the advantage of the wide stair is that it's like a gigantic piece of furniture, so that people have books on it or plants and things like that.
But Martin, to get to your other question about, I think it's touching on the question of conventions of living, you know, and the conventions. We are very comfortable with working with the kind of traditional conventions of intimacy, of living, of normality, basically, and we want to be very precise in our conversation about which goalposts we think we are allowed to move, you know? And I think for me the curtain that would not even lower the rent, for me that would be a kind of, you know, ideological imposition, to be honest, no? Onto the inhabitants. While the proper, you know, the proper bathroom where you can even open the window and so you don't need ventilation, it works very well. So the kind of conventional practicality is very important for us, huh? And so we like to be. We think the real exploration is happening where you can stay in 90% within the convention of living, and just, you know, move very specific goalposts to get somewhere else. Huh? So no, I don't think it's progress if I shit next to my partner in an open toilet. No, just to give it an example. So there are certain conventions that I'm completely at ease with. You know.
Well, thank you for.
What a way to end.
Sorry, and that was not meant. That was.
Thank you for your lecture.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the lecture, but also for your generosity in discussing all these aspects of your project.